some technical difficulty, but we're up and running now. And welcome to March, the Cabarrus County Beekeepers. Exciting time in the hives right now. If you're going in your hives, you're seeing a lot of things change. The weather's changing, the sun's shining finally, and the bees are taking advantage of it. So hopefully your bees are looking good. I'm hearing a lot of good reports. People are hearing some bad reports, including some of mine. So take it all in stride. Just a few announcements. The door prize is a 50-50 like usual. If you didn't sign up, Sonia and Mike, Spike Harry, and Angel at the back. Make sure you do that before the end of the meeting. And tonight we've got Dr. James Hicks, the creator of Wilkes. Dr. James Wilkes, the creator of HiveTracks, and also owner of Faith Mountain Farms here to share the HiveTracks and the new club stuff he's doing with HiveTracks. So I'm gonna bring him up and let him get started.
I'm sorry with y'all.
I'm turning green on
I
that.
have no idea. I'm sorry. It might be 100-foot cable.
Could be. How's, test, correct? Does this work?
No.
You mean to do that? Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's
I don't know what that was.
That was a wireless mic.
Oh, I thought that was yours.
Church. Yeah, that might belong to the church.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So I get to, like I'm in a nightclub or something.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
There we go.
Drop the mic.
All right. In color.
I think it's the cable. There's something wrong with the
It's
cable.
only 500-foot long cable, so.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
We can still see it.
Just pretend like it's a little different shade.
We pretend we have sunglasses.
Okay. All right, so it's great to be here with you. And my name is James Wilkes, and my hope for tonight, the title, I hope I'm not going to bait and switch you too much. It says Club Colony Data Collection Using HiveTracks. That sounds like an advertisement for HiveTracks, which I'm a bit allergic to that. The issue is much broader than HiveTracks. We're part of a bigger ecosystem, I would say, and that ecosystem is honeybee data. And I want to kind of cast a vision or help you to see the value and really how you can contribute as a beekeeper, whether you're a HiveTracks user or not, how important data and information is to you to be a good beekeeper. Okay? And I'm going to give you any number of ways for you to participate and be a part of that, one of which is HiveTracks. So this is going to be pretty wide-ranging, and whatever resonates with you, take that away, right? And feel free to ask questions, or as questions come into your mind, remember them, and hopefully we'll have a little Q&A at the end. I don't know how long do I have?
45 minutes.
45 minutes. So just yell or wave your hand or something if I'm getting too close to that. And it's about that length of time. So in this picture on the left, that is me eating a popsicle, I think, in my backyard in Eden, North Carolina. So I grew up on the other border of the state with Virginia and Rockingham County, if you're not familiar with that. And somebody over here grew up in that same place as well. And that's my dad. That's my dad showing me about bees. We actually had my 5th grade class. That's 1975. My 5th grade class was over. He was an educator. My mom was a teacher as well. And so he was teaching my class, and I was looking very intense. It looks like they're really soaking it up. And that really was the seeds that were planted for where I am today in terms of honeybees and even just naturalists and enjoying nature and outside and those sorts of things. On the other side, that picture, that's my son Sullivan. He's 20 years old now. That's a couple of years ago. And there's a lot going on in that photo that you can't see, but he's taken up beekeeping himself, and I'll talk a little bit more about the kinds of things he's doing. And the point here is that beekeeping has changed quite a bit in that length of time. I'm going to do a little experiment right here with my phone. Let's see how, these are supposed to be smart, right? They call them smartphones. And sometimes they're smart, and sometimes they're just really frustrating. and don't do what you want them to do. But I'm going to ask my phone a question and see what answer it comes up with. Make sure that's blind.
Gotta be okay.
No, I didn't ask you a question yet. Wait. Why should I care about honeybees?
Here's a summary from Helpline. If you think bees are only good for making honey, think again. Most of the crops that bees pollinate are vegetables, fruits, and nuts, all staples of a healthy diet. In fact, honeybees pollinate plants that produce about a quarter of the food Americans consume.
That was pretty good,
Not bad.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it actually illustrates that every single human being should be concerned about honeybees. And when you have people that ask you, when you start telling people that you keep bees, they really tend to get curious and interested, things like that. And they should, because a lot of their food depends on honeybees, right? So again, what I want to talk about is what can we do as beekeepers with the technology that's available today, like this thing in your pocket, or even if you don't have that, there's information, there's data that is super important to you being a good beekeeper. So here's some of my background. My life is kind of a mashup of all sorts of different things. One of that's computer science. I'm a professor at App State, been there 27 years, so that's the tech side of me. I started a farm with my family in 2005-ish, and that's kind of taken off and has its own life. And then I created HiveTracks about 10 years ago was when the first idea occurred in my bee yard. I was standing there at my hive when I can't remember what I did the last time I was here. Anybody had that? And I had this device in my pocket, and the computer science in me said, this thing ought to be helping me out here. It ought to be giving me some information that I can make better decisions. And so that was the genesis of HiveTracks and just this whole journey that I've been on for the last 10 years. That's combined the computer science, my farm, and software and technology. If you're counting, there's 8 kids there, 5 boys, 3 girls, 2 grandbabies. 2 more grandbabies on the way. Woohoo!
But you beat us.
All right. So all of us are interested, I think, in making good apiary management decisions, meaning we want our bees to be healthy, which in turn makes them productive. And that can mean different things to different folks. And it depends on whether you're a hobbyist or a sideliner or a commercial beekeeper. If you're a commercial beekeeper, am I pollinating, or am I making honey, or am I growing bees, or what's my purpose, right, in keeping bees? And we'll make different decisions based on that. But all of these pieces to the equation, the first part there is kind of what you do when you take a bee class, right? You learn, you watch YouTube videos, you read books, you talk to other folks, and then you get bees and you gain experience, and that just accumulates over time. Now, these other ones, what I would call operational data is again, that why do you keep bees? What's your kind of philosophy of keeping bees? Where are your bees, right? That's important. And then the next one is observational data. So operational data, observational data. We have sensors as human beings. When you go to the hive, you're using your eyes, and usually your nose, and you hear. All these sensors that you're using when you're looking at the hive, and you're gathering information, right, about the hive, about its current state. Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? You're thinking through whatever checklist or thing that you have been taught or that you've learned, that this is what I need to look for, right? I call that observational data. And we use that to make decisions, right? And what are we going to do with the bees? Are they okay? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? That's the best case. Because when that's happening, you go, oh, great. Close them up, come back next time, right? But if something's off a little bit, then we have to make a decision. Do we intervene? Is there something that we need to look at next time? Or do we need to come back sooner? All these kinds of decision points, right? That how many new beekeepers? Do we have any new beekeepers? Okay, let's say 1 year or less. Okay, so you're probably a bit overwhelmed by the amount of information and decisions that, well, I would suggest even older beekeepers probably are as well. The more you know, the more you don't know is at least kind of how I take it. But those first three are usually the ones that we mostly think about, and then there's other information that's really important to being a successful beekeeper. The one there is secondary data sources. Do you care about the weather? You better care about the weather. What about what's blooming nearby? You know, once you become a beekeeper, you automatically are always looking, right? What's blooming now? When does it start? You just become much more observant, I would suggest, or you should. When you're driving down the road. When I was coming down, so I'm up in the mountains, which, if you don't know it, it's a completely different climate up there than it is down here. And we just had our first maple bloom in my yard this week. And you're about leafing out with the maples right now. So, and just driving down, you can see the change in the flora and what stage it is. And we actually use that elevation in our operation. I can talk about that at some point, but you know, there's a big difference in your location. And so what's out there to forage, what's the weather? If you're in agriculture areas, are they getting exposure to things that you don't want them to be exposed to, things like that. And then this last one is relatively new. I would classify it as Hive Monitor data. You've certainly heard of the buzzwords. That was a joke. Buzzwords, Internet of Things, big data, all those kinds of words that are in the tech space. Well, honeybees and beekeeping is not immune to that. We're a bit slow to the game, I would suggest. Precision agriculture, if you look at big ag, and the John Deere tractors that are tricked out with all sorts of sensors and GPS and cameras and things like that, decision support, you know, systems for agriculture. Beekeeping is a little bit behind in that, but it's coming, and it's here. It's just early stages of development. But there's some really interesting things there. I'm going to show you some slides that'll give you a glimpse into what that can do for you. If you haven't seen it before, it'll be eye-opening for you. Hive Monitor data, what it gives you is a picture of what's going on when you're not there. Right? When you go and you look at your hive, you get a snapshot of that moment in time. This is what's going on, and you're left to kind of wonder or infer, you know, what was going on before that led up to that state, right? So hive monitoring data is there, typically gathering data all the time, continuously, and again, catches things that are going on in the hive when you weren't there, right? So technology, all those red ones, technology is front and center in collecting a whole bunch of that data already, whether you know it or not. Sometimes you don't know this, doing that. So I would guess that most folks have some sort of technology that they're using or on a regular basis, whether it's your cell phone or computers, use applications like Google Docs, things like that. And you're really collecting data, whether you're aware of it or not. Anybody have a smartphone? Okay, use Google. Have you looked at Google Timeline? If you've never looked at Google Timeline, go to Maps. There's a little hamburger menu on the left called Timeline. It'll tell you where you've been, just in case you forgot. It knows where your phone's been, at least, right? And you know, when you visit a certain place and pictures that you took along the way, things like that. And not to veer off into privacy and those sorts of things, which is important when you're using technology. But a lot of information is collected about you, even without you knowing it. So let's talk a little bit about these different categories of data. And again, I'm going to focus on a couple of projects that I'm engaged with. One is HiveTracks. The other is Be Informed Partnership, which is kind of my academic hat with that. But both of those have a lot of places, again, that you can get information that can help you make better decisions as a beekeeper. All right. So where is data collected now? Who does it? You collect data, right? When you go to the bee yard and you look, stuff goes in your brain. You observe, what's the brood pattern? Is it queen right? How many frames of bees? Are they making honey? Are they bringing pollen in and out the front? Are there drones? All these kinds of things, right, that you are trying to observe and then remember. Maybe you remember them in your head. Maybe you write them down. I mean, there's different ways that people collect information. I hope you would agree with me that that's important. When you take a class, and record keeping is always a part of that, but we're always horrible at doing it, I would say. And so we come up with all sorts of ways to try to do it. In our head is the first line, and that fails pretty quickly. Okay. Others writing on the hive. Anybody else write on the hive? I write on the hive. It's very good. I mean, the information's right there. You don't have to look anywhere for it. Notebook. Anybody write in a notebook or piece of paper or something? And sometimes we'll actually get that over into maybe a spreadsheet or a document of some sort, electronic, and then there's HiveTracks, and those kinds of tools come in there as well, right? The ideal would be, you just walk in your yard, you do your stuff, and then you go to the computer and it magically shows up, oh, here's the things you did, here's the pictures that you took, here's what you observed, right? And you wouldn't have to do a whole lot, but still, right now, there's a lot of human involvement in collecting that data, even with the technology, right? Although, like I said, your phone already knows location, so that and when. Are those important data points, actually? I would suggest those are some of the most important. One, where, then you know that you were at that yard. When did you check it? We can get into a debate if you want to about how often do you check your bees and blah, blah, blah. But you have some notion in your head, right, about how often I should be checking my bees. And I'll bet we aren't really good at keeping a schedule. Especially if you're busy and you think, was it a week ago or 2 weeks ago that I checked that hive, or 3 weeks ago? And then you get busy and you come back and you ask yourself the same question, and then it gets to be several weeks, and a lot of things can happen, especially this time of year, right? Get past 21 days and yeah, you could be veering way off the path, right? Just based on the bee biology, right? So that information, how often you check your bees, when you were there, is important. There's other data. There's government. If you're in North Carolina, we aren't required to register our hives. Some states you are. Other groups like Bee Informed Partnership are collecting survey data. Anybody in here have to take the NAS survey? Do you get called? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's the USDA National Agricultural Statistical Service does quarterly surveys on bee losses, and they will annoy the fool out of you, right? You have to back me up here. They will call you and call you and call you to collect this information, okay? And then, like I said, Bee Informed Partnership collects this data, HiveTracks collects this data. Anybody on Facebook? You've got a nice Facebook group that's going here. There's a whole lot of really good information going on in these Facebook groups. I don't know if you've availed yourself of that resource or not, but yeah, Facebook, talking about data collection, we could talk about them. But if you look at these Facebook groups and these people interacting, it's like you being here, right? Saying, hey, how are your bees doing? What's blooming? What's going on? Well, you get this whole other picture in that space, which in that respect, it's good, I think. But that information is out there and is growing more and more as we go, right? So let me dive in just briefly, again, with the Bee Informed Partnership. And how many of you have heard of the Bee Informed Partnership? Okay, good. You know, they do an annual loss survey. That's getting ready to come up, starts April 1st. You need to know how many bees you had October 1st alive, how many bees you had alive April 1st, and whether you bought or sold any in the interim, and just to know what your losses are for the winter. And that information is, if you look at any news report about honeybee losses in the U.S., they use the data from that project. Okay. So the Bee Informed Partnership itself was started in 2011. Myself and David Tarpey from NC State, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and Dennis Van Engelstoor collaborated on a grant to the USDA. It was about a $5.5 million. It was a big grant between a bunch of universities, most of the big bee research universities. So University of Georgia, University of Tennessee, at the time Penn State, now University of Maryland, University of Minnesota, Marla Spivak. You might know, familiar with Marla Spivak. She was on that. And then some California folks. So it was a really big deal to get that grant. And then there's all of these kind of survey came out of that. My role in that was IT infrastructure behind it. So I was kind of the lead on the IT side of that. So Appalachian and my students and other folks were building that infrastructure to support these bee researchers. And there is, go to beeinformed.org is I meant to make a handout, but I never got to it this week. But beeinformed.org, there is so much information there. From these surveys, they have the winter loss numbers there. You can look at state, just if you're a curious person, you can kind of see, what the losses are in different states, north, south, east, west. But there's information there that shows kind of correlations. They use some epidemiology kind of tools from the health space and brought it over into the bee data. And so asking questions like, for people who treated for varroa, what was their average winter loss? For people who did not treat for varroa, what was their average winter loss? Is there a statistical difference between those? The answer is yes. And you can even look at specific products or other practices, winterizing your hives, things like that. So if you're a data kind of person, you could spend a lot of time there. Another thing they do is the sentinel apiaries, and actually the yard that I keep, this nearby here, it's been part of that project. And Sullivan right here is participating. This is an apiary that was participating in the sentinel apiary. And what we did with those, what Bee Informed is doing with those apiaries, you can see some stuff going on in this picture. I think you can see a tag on those hives, so the hives have an ID. There's a scale under there. Anybody have a hive scale under their hive? Okay. What brand? Is it Broodminder or Solution Bee? Solution Bee. Yeah, that's a Solution Bee right there. You can see there's a measuring cup. And what he's actually doing as part of the Sentinel Apiary program. So you've heard of varroa monitoring, I hope. Let's back up. Have you heard of varroa? Okay. Varroa monitoring, just being aware of what the current load is on your hive. Okay, and that's typically mites per 100 bees. And the way you measure that is you take a sample of 300 bees, you wash the mites off of it, count the mites, and divide by 3. And so as part of this project, we would do monthly samples of the hives in these yards and collecting much more detailed data about those hives so that the researchers would then have these nice data sets. Right? So you've got varroa loads across the season. They also tested for nosema, so you'd have the nosema counts across the season. Then you'd also have the strength of the hive, the queen status, the productivity of the hive, all this data about the hives in those sentinel apiaries. They are then beginning to analyze and come up with some interesting, again, relationships is what we're after. So for this outcome, can we look backwards in time and see these are the practices that lead to better outcomes, right? And the data supports that. That's the goal, is to come up with data-driven best practices. So not the practice that so-and-so over here claims is the best thing since sliced bread. And if everybody does that, then all our hives are going to be healthy. But data across a wide range of people, in a wide range of circumstances, you know, the data supports doing this particular thing. Okay, and you can still choose whether you want to do it or not, but there's some data behind it, and I think that will add a new dimension to beekeeping and the decisions that we make. That's the hope, anyway. And yeah, we still use paper. Even though we're building the infrastructure behind it, there's only so much, it's time and energy and money that you have to build things, and pencil and paper always works, okay? But you can see here some of the things, if I have a pointer, I don't. You look across the top there, there's clean status, brood pattern, frames of bees, and then just general observations. Okay, so those are the kinds of things that the bee researchers are looking at. So they pair this data with varroa loads, things like that. And the way to look at this graph, you can see the darker greenish where the ouch is, right? So that, if you look at that bar that's in September, that varroa load is up close to 9. That is really horrible. There's a threshold at about 2 or 3 where you should be doing something for your bees. And so this graph shows that in July we were below threshold. August we were above threshold, should have been treating right there, probably didn't treat right there. So then got into September and the varroa load was through the roof. But then you can see we treated and it came back down below threshold. Now, what's not shown on that graph is what's the outcome for those hives. Because if you get to the 9 for any length of time, you're doing damage to the bees and you're going to compromise their health downstream, right? They might stay alive now, but when you have those winter losses that you're scratching your head, well, you can always trace those back. They go back to what was happening in July and August and September, really. Okay. Another piece of this that has been, oh, you can't see that at all. That's horrible. It looks really nice on my screen right here. Anybody at the state meeting not too long ago? Lewis Caldwell, I think, talked about the Mite Check program. And so this is a map that's part of that, and it's under Bee Informed Partnership. And what it does is it records the mite loads for a particular county. You can, when you're doing your monitoring for your varroa, so if you do an alcohol wash, a sugar shake, and you get a count, you enter those counts into this map. And then you can go and you can see, are the varroa loads high or low in my county, right? And again, that helps you raise the awareness and your understanding of what's going on in your neighborhood with varroa. Because if your neighbor has high varroa, then that's of interest to you, let's say, right? Because if their hive crashes, then there's potential that you're going to inherit some of those varroa mites in your hive. Okay, and so this particular project is just a rolling map, and you can look back and you can see, you know, varroa loads over time, things like that, and it's a useful tool. And this one is actually, we've got a grant that's continuing to fund some of this. The data is going to get even more detailed. When you go into a county, it's going to give you a lot more detail than it does even right here. All right, so that was just a few things from Bee Informed Partnership. Go to beeinformed.org. Make sure you look at that, dig around. Again, you can spend a lot of time looking at things there. So HiveTracks.com, again, this is operational and observational data, the things that just define your beekeeping. That's really what it is. What's the state of your bees? And so it's really a digital representation, if you will, of your bee yard. Its location, how many hives you have, their configurations, what you've done to them, when was the last time you touched them, again, when did I look at my bees, what did I do last time, because generally what you do the next time hinges on what you did the time before, and things like that. The one thing to point out is this is immediately useful to you as a beekeeper. I mean, you can look at this kind of from a hedonistic or a selfish viewpoint that why would you use this? Well, it's going to be helpful to you. It's going to give you information, again, that you forget or that you misplace to make better decisions. The added bonus is that when we aggregate this data, then it becomes valuable to the whole community. You came here tonight, you've been talking, well, how are your bees doing? You know, what's blooming? You know, what's this, what's that? Well, if all that data is aggregated together and you can kind of look at it as a community, then again, it raises the level of information and maintaining privacy in the midst of all that. I mean, you may or may not care whether people know where your yards are, but you should have the option, right, of knowing that. But the aggregate value of this data is really our long-term vision. We can have data sets that allow us to ask questions we've never been able to ask before. Okay, it's always been anecdotal, kind of driven beekeeping. The scientists try to do their experiments. You know, these honeybees and them sitting out in some location is such a dynamic system. And do you know how many variables there are? Have you ever tried to do an experiment? You do experiment. We're all experimenters as beekeepers, right? And we're all our own unique little location. Think about it this way. So when you have wherever your hive is, it's totally dependent on that 2 to 3 mile radius ecosystem around your hive, right? And so everything that goes on with that hive is tied to what goes on in that little 2 to 3 mile radius, unless you bring something in or you take something out. Okay? So its life is dependent on that. And that's like a fingerprint. It's very unique. Maybe unless you're sitting in the middle of an almond orchard where the 2 to 3 mile radius is just almonds, then it's very, the same. But in general, every hive is a unique organism in a unique place. So trying to control that and do experiments is just extremely difficult. So the bee researchers have a horrible time trying to deal with that and come out with results that we can't say, well, when I did that, it did something different, right? So anyway, this at least gives us the opportunity, I think. The color's bad again, but each of those dots, this is the United States. And so right in the middle there, right next to the states, is at 344. That means underneath that dot, there's 344 yards that are HiveTracks or HiveTracks users. Okay? So this is just a map of the coverage of yards that HiveTracks users have. Now, this map, you can see it's more red up here in the southeast where we're based, right? This map is one where people have opted in. So by default, all of your yards are private, but you can share your information if you want. And that's about a third of the users share their yard information with the HiveTracks world. So let me just go real quick through a couple of these features. Okay, so some things that we're really concentrating on this year. Healthy Colony Checklist. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's relatively new. But the idea here is that if I look at a hive and Mark looks at a hive and assesses that hive, inspects that hive, whatever word, then what does Mark observe and what do I observe is going to be different. Right? The way he describes it, the way I describe it. So if we had a common language that we could describe it similarly, a standard even that we could use for comparing, that would be really great. Because then we could compare across different people that would make up for that variability. And so Healthy Colony Checklist is an attempt to do that. And it's actually a super educational tool. It gives you the things that you should be looking for anyway when you're doing an assessment of your hive. There's a couple of others out there that are like this. We're getting ready to write a paper that's comparing them and getting support for, is this a good standard to use? But it looks at what's the brood look like, what's the adult population, what's the clean status, what's the food like, that's your nutrition, what are the stressors, mites, what are other, and space. Okay? And you just answer yes, no. So at the end of it, you end up with a number. If it's a no, then it should trigger you into doing something. Either you ask more questions or you take some action. But in the end, there's a number, and we can compare it. And over time, you can look at your hives. Are they getting better in this or getting worse? So you'll hear more about this as we go along. When you'll end up with graphs like this, and then we can compare across all the beekeepers in the room, right? Is this something that's widespread? Is this trend, everybody's doing this, or are you an anomaly? You know, you're an outlier, and you need to do something. That's why you should always keep more than one hive, right? Don't have just one hive, because then you never know. Is it me? Is it the bees? Is it what's going on in the neighborhood? Yeah. So mites, I said as well, you can record mite loads inside HiveTracks as well, okay? And those actually get pushed over to the mite check website. I have inside pull. I'm on both sides of that software. So the data from HiveTracks gets pushed over into the mite check survey if you opt in. And so you don't have to do anything extra, and it populates that map. Okay, so that's my first little thing of gluing these pieces together. My big vision is that all this whole ecosystem kind of talks to each other and paints a complete picture. And then this is kind of what I was supposed to talk about, right? Club data. We already have this thing inside HiveTracks called Community, that you can create this community for the club, and you can aggregate your information together in the club. It doesn't go outside. It's kind of a in-between sharing kind of mechanism. And so we have that already built in. This was again, it's hard to see, but you can look at stats, you know, how many inspections were done in the last month, how much honey was harvested, who's treating, whatever actions are going on. You can give that information to the whole club so people can see what's going on across the club. All right. Alan, how much more time are you going to give me? 5 minutes?
10.
10? Okay, I'll go 10. It's just getting interesting. Okay, wake up. So Hive monitor data. This might be some things. All the others, like, yeah, that's information. I look at, you know, monitor for raw. I do my stuff, recording that makes sense. But some of this you may not have seen before from Hive monitoring data. And again, this is sensors that are on the hive. So it tells us some things that are going on that we typically aren't able to sense ourselves, right? And weight is a very easy one to understand. Conceptually, we know our hives gain weight during the flow, they lose weight at other times, whether it's a dearth or overwinter, right? So there's this ebb and flow of weight of your hive. And so scales do that, and you can barely see the line. By the way, some of these are in kilograms, so it's 2.2 pounds per kilo. That's your conversion factor, okay? But in this case, so this was a spring flow. This was over 6 days. We can't see the jags very good, but each little bump there is another day, okay? I've got another slide that I think we're going to be able to see those better, but in this case, it went from 81 kg to 104 kg, so about 50 pounds over 6 days. That's pretty rocking high, right? That's a good spring flow. You might recognize this.
Oh, yeah.
That's sourwood. So as part of our farm operation, we focus on producing sourwood honey. And so we go to a lot of energy and effort into making that happen. Actually, we're working on a documentary called Chasing Sourwood that we're about to do a crowdfunding thing with it that's going to document a season of us making sourwood honey. It's going to be just so much fun if we're able to pull that off. I'll send that information when we kick that off, but it's showing little segments of how do you go about making sourwood. Okay, it's sort of mysterious, and then there's questions about, is this really sourwood honey? And I'll suggest you ask that question. Okay, I depend on you asking that question because I make real sourwood honey, and so many people sell fake sourwood honey, and we're doing something about that too on the technology side. So here we are loading up to move some hives to sourwood. Looks like you got a little kid to help him. This is Solomon. We put the bees out. He's supering them up, and then yeah, this was a pretty crazy good hive. Again, it's hard to see, but over there is 24 June, we're the 75 kg, and then this is about July 12. That's the window for where we were located for sourwood. And so that's 143 pounds that hive gained. That's unusual. If they were all like that, man, we would be rolling. There's a few supers in there as well, right? I mean, some of that weight's supers. And again, if we could see the scales better, you can see it. But the weight of a hive during the day is quite fascinating. The bees leave in the morning. The weight drops a few pounds as the foragers go out. That also happens when it swarms, but that's super quick. And then as those bees start coming back in, the weight goes zooming up. Okay, if it rains during the day, then the weight goes up even faster because they all come back home. And then when it stops raining, drops again, they go back out. So you can see what's going on. Even you can infer the weather from the weight. And then at night, have you ever seen the scale? At night it goes down. Okay? Nectar is not honey, right? There's a process. Nectar, in fact, has a whole lot of water in it. What percentage should honey be? 18.6 or less. And somehow those little critters know when it's 18.6% to cap it off. Right? So how do they get the moisture out of it? They push air across the surface of the honey and vent that moisture out of the hive. The scale trickles down at night. And it's that moisture-laden air that's going out of the hive. If that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what does, okay? You can see that on a really good flow, and it's dry. It's just this kind of cookie cutter graph that you can see. All right. Yeah, you can see them smirking right there. So this is about 1,000 pounds of sourwood honey so we're very happy with the harvest. So then let's talk a little bit again about secondary data and what's going on around your bees and just being aware of that. And how can you know what's going on? Well, so as far as land use, satellite images, you ever looked at a satellite image? Just go to Google Maps. They have very nice satellite images. Street view probably scares you. Like why are they going by my house? And they subtract the people out, or try to. And then weather, of course, affects flying time. It affects clustering time. It affects what the bees can do and can't do inside the hive. If you are pollinating almonds, then you need a certain number of hours for those bees to be able to fly so that they can pollinate the almonds so that you can get nuts set. So you better bet that in those almond orchards, they know what the weather is. They know how many hours of flight time they're getting. They know if the almonds are going to get pollinated well enough. We're just coming off of almonds. If you didn't know that, that's the crazy biggest pollination event in the universe. Happens in February in California. So anyway, there's these things that affect your bees, right, in the area. So here's a satellite image. This is up in Statesville, just north of I-40, 115, I-40. This is in the little corner right there. And you can guess these fields over here are agricultural fields, right? And that little box, the triple box in the middle is where our bee yard is located. So sometimes those fields look like that, which is just an awesome picture. If you're a beekeeper and you know what's going on there, it gives you goosebumps. That's canola, and you can say what you want to about canola, but its pollen is actually really nutritious, and the amount of nectar that it has is ridiculous. And so we have bees here in the springtime, like right now, and we split bees there, we grow bees there. You can grow bees like crazy in this kind of environment without feeding so much, and they'll still make honey. You can split them all day long, and you'll still end up with a super or two of honey without even trying. It's kind of crazy, but that's important to us to know that that's where those bees are. Iredell County all of a sudden started growing canola, and they're one of the biggest canola producers in the state, and it's really good for bees if you happen to have something up that way. This one, yeah, the darker green, this is our sourwood area, and the darker green is woods. Sourwood is a tree, right? It blooms when nothing else is blooming in the woods. That's why you can get straight sourwood, right? Sumac blooms a little bit in there, but if you're in the woods, you're either going to get sourwood or nothing. We've had to pull hives out of the sourwood yard because it wasn't happening, and they lost weight instead of that 143 pounds. So again, that's why that information is good to know. So anybody recognize what's going on here?
Queens.
Raising some queens. Okay, this was a week ago Friday. So Sullivan did our first graft, and so this was, he just pulled it out. They were beginning to accept the cells and put it back in, and 18 degrees Fahrenheit. This was 319. This was this past Tuesday. You see in the background of that picture is the cell builder that has those queens in it. Is that important? How cold it is? You bet it is. And so we're going, is this going to work or not? I don't know. But it's a big influence, right? Again, the point is, what's going on around is in the weather is important. Sometimes you just have to push the edges a little bit, and it turns out that this is that same day. You can see they capped them off there. So we're not sure on the edges if we lost some, but they're doing pretty good. All right, so wrapping up here. Again, I've covered a lot of ground. Our big vision, again, is what I would say is bee data analytics. Okay. So you've heard of machine learning, IoT, all those sorts of computer science, technology things. We have an opportunity in this space to use some of those tools to really push things forward in our understanding of it. That is to better understand honeybees and beekeepers, our management practices, how to keep them healthy. There's a thread of honey authenticity in here. Remember I said, how do you know it's sourwood honey? Well, I just showed you my yard location, right? That's one piece of the puzzle. If you believe that my hives were there, well, you can just believe me, right? If you trust me, it's a matter of trust, right? You have to trust the person who's selling the thing that it is what they say it is, right? But then you can add evidence to that, to trust but verify. and so that where are they? When were they there? If you've got scales on them, it tells you a volume. Right? So there's evidence you can begin to collect to authenticate that honey. And we're working on some things there that are very interesting. But it combines all these software, hardware, observations, the sensors together. And one of my business partners is a data analytics guy. And this is his thing. This is what he loves to do. So what are the next steps? Well, is it easy to use? Is it affordable? Is it useful? What do we collect? What does it mean? We've got a data standardization project. This Healthy Colony Checklist I'm talking about is supporting our evaluation of that. And then we just need people to use it well, and give us feedback, those sorts of things. And then there's just so many moving parts here. I hope I've at least conveyed that to you, that there's a whole bunch of interesting pieces to this. And just organizing those or kind of distilling good information out of all that is a big challenge. So what can you do? Well, you can agree with me that keeping information or data about your bees is a good thing. And then start doing some of that. Just take the first step. Don't, if you go, I'm going to do all these things, and you're going to fail. Just do the first step. Do the most simple thing that you think is most important to you. And one of those things would be visiting your hives on a regular basis, monitoring for varroa, things like that. And then help encourage one another to do that. And then most important, enjoy the bees. Don't forget that part. I don't want to take myself out of the bee yard, okay? some of these technology things you'll see, you're like, oh, well, you never have to check the bees. I was like, well, what's fun is that? You know, I want to, I enjoy being in the bees and things like that. So that's pretty much it. You know what that is, right? Yes. This was taken with a Samsung S9 phone. I mean, that's just incredible. That you could get that this was Sullivan, and he said it just happened. There was a white barn wall behind him. So the sun was coming this way and reflected off of it right into the bottom of the cells. And yeah, that was pretty amazing. Okay. Any questions? Sorry, I've just been rambling. Yes?
Is there a charge for HiveTracks?
Great question. I was hoping no one would ask that. Yeah, so we've iterated on multiple business models over the year. It started out free for everyone, then we went premium. Now we're on a free trial, and then there's a software as a service fee. So like your Spotify or Amazon Prime or Netflix or HiveTracks. Yeah, so that's what it is right now. We actually want to change that, but we're working on figuring out ways to do that. If anybody's really well off and wants to sponsor HiveTracks for everybody, we can work out a deal. But that's really, we actually really want to go there because the data to us and the value to the community is so high in our estimation. Yes.
Is there a certain charge for a club to join HiveTracks?
Sort of. So I'm working on, I've had several kind of pilot projects with clubs. In fact, the Watauga and Nash County clubs in my area, we're doing stuff with them, and we're happy to talk about those kinds of things. And I don't want the cost to be a barrier. That is, we have to, pay people to do things and pay for servers and that sort of thing. But yeah, figuring out ways to support it, and club membership is certainly one way to do that. Yeah. Other questions? By the way, what I talked about here with HiveTracks was the hobbyist version of the tool, and we also have a commercial version as well. That it's really, makes more sense when you're 200 plus hives, and it's quite fascinating to watch the commercial guys and how they do things, and it's really cool. What else? Yes?
You mentioned bee data analytics. Anything on the horizon with regards to artificial intelligence and decision making?
Right, so the question is there something on the horizon with the machine learning AI? Yes, we've begun doing some analysis of the data that we have right now, and that actually highlighted kind of the gaps that we have and the dirtiness of the data. If you're in data, you know what I'm talking about. And so that's kind of helped us pivot into making the tools better to get the data, designing the tools, and we're in the middle of redesign all the time, building tools with data in mind. And so we have some stuff going on there, but even from the data that we have, we're doing some things with, say, disease prevalence and kind of mapping, where diseases are showing up in your, in your inspection reports and things like that. So the early stages of that have started. Yeah.
And with regards to decision support, let's say there's a new beekeeper, they input, different fields, different data.
Right. So
Is
decision support, yeah. Is there, certainly we would anticipate some guidance, right? If your alerts, things like that. I mean, right now, even just from the scale data, you could subscribe, this is an idea, you could subscribe to a nectar forecast, say, just like weather forecast, right? What's the nectar forecast for today? I think you get probably better than the weatherman. At least, they just have to predict rain right now. They're good. 90% of the time.
Yeah.
What else? I know I'm running over, sorry. I'll answer questions. There was something. Oh, let me show you this. This is.
So you can go to HiveTracks.com?
Oh, yeah, I should say something like that, shouldn't I? Yeah, HiveTracks.com.
Is that
Go
it?
there, sign up, there's a button, free trial, your name, first name and an email, that's all that's required for that. And just get on there and play around, I mean, that's what it's for. And feel free to email me directly, James at HiveTracks, with questions, things like that. Yeah, so let me show you, maybe, oh, I don't have internet. Oh. I was going to show you my Saskatchewan beekeeper. So, sometimes we complain about it being cold, or we wonder, well, is the cold going to hurt my bees? Well, I have users in Saskatchewan, and if you're not familiar with geography, that's really far north. And it gets really cold there. And in fact, they have quite the cold and snow. Oh yeah, we're getting there. And so I want to show you these pictures. He texted me, my user there texted me this past week. And so they started checking their hives. They're digging them out, is how that goes. So let's look at their pictures. Oh wow, their snow's clearing up fast. So last week they were, yeah, it was much deeper. I don't know if y'all can see that or not, but let me pull one of these up so you can see how the canadians do it. So this is a 4-way pallet, so there's 4 hives, and they push them together and wrap all 4 of them together, put this little piece of plywood over the top. But these are outside, and they're double beams, and they have an upper entrance as well. But they overwinter outside, -40 actual temperature, and they come busting out and make 350, 400 pounds of honey. If you look at the honey production in these, I don't know if I have time to get to the pictures, but it's double beams, queen excluder. Yes, they use queen excluders. If you want to debate about that, here's a good case study. And then they'll have 6 or 8 deeps. All deeps.
Wow.
My son went up and pulled honey with him in August, and he said, about halfway through the first day, he texted me, he said, by the end of today, we're going to pull 10 times more honey than we harvest in a single season. And that was in a single day, pulling 60,000 pounds of honey.
Wow.
What's the
Canola and alfalfa and other, there's some forage or something like that. But, and they use queen excluders, so if you want to say queen excluders, you want to reduce honey, I don't know. I'd hate to see what those would look like if they had the queen excluders on.
But they do have a top entrance.
Yes, these do, actually you can't quite see, there's a little, right there next to that, there's a little opening in the, but they don't come out, I mean, I don't get much opportunity to come out. And I've seen some really interesting things, because they have to stay in there a long time every winter and hold it, right? And so, if they have any kind of nosema issues or even food sources that are not as good for, there's some nectar that's better for overwintering than others. Okay? If the nectar has more things that they can't digest, that's really what the bottom line is. And if they can't digest it, then they have to go to the bathroom. Okay? But if you can digest it all purely, then you can stay in there longer. So some really interesting kind of dynamics like that. And then let me go. let me go, so I'm gonna do it. You're gonna have to just stay put. So this is on the other side of the world. This is in New Zealand. By the way, on this one, so you see the numbers there, actually the little blue pins. So they've been working today. In fact, so you can't really read that, but that was 2 hours ago where they entered this data. So this is real time. The idea here is that your crews are out running the yards. You can be wherever and see what's going on. So for example, last summer when I was in New Zealand, I could see what was going on with the sourwood flow with Sullivan through our system. So this is New Zealand. And of course they're in the fall, right? Going into getting ready to go to winter. Yeah, I wish the color was better. It looks pretty nice over here. Okay, I'll be done. Unless there's another question. Okay.